In Africa's history, many people have come and gone, leaving behind a legacy of peace and prosperity through their fight for independence, economic stability, and continental unity. Today, we'll be counting down the top 6 greatest of these incredible leaders, most of whom rose at a time when the continent was shattered by colonialism. 6. Robert Mugabe. Robert Mugabe, who served as Zimbabwe's president from 1987 to 2017, was a significant figure in the country's history and the broader African liberation struggle. He was a strong advocate for the liberation of African countries that were still under colonial rule, providing material and moral support to various anti-colonial movements and offering military training and logistical support for their operations. Mugabe was also a vocal advocate for the creation of the African Union and played an instrumental role in the establishment of the Southern African Development Community (SADC) and the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa (COMESA) to promote trade, economic integration, and political cooperation among member countries. Mugabe's Pan-Africanism is exemplified through his support for African liberation movements and his championing of African unity. 5. Sekou Touré. As a staunch supporter of Pan-Africanism, Sekou Touré worked tirelessly to foster cooperation among countries of Africa. His work in creating the Organization of African Union is emblematic of his Pan-Africanist ideals. The OAU was founded in large part due to Sekou Touré's 1963 hosting of the Conference of African Heads of State in Conakry. Many African countries owe their independence and decolonization in large part due to the efforts of this organization, which sought to foster unity, collaboration, and development among African countries. Touré's advocacy for liberation movements through the continent is another illustration of his Pan-Africanist initiatives. He gave safe haven and aid to nationalist groups from many countries, including Angola, Mozambique, and South Africa. Touré's backing of these uprisings was an indication of his dedication to the larger fight for Pan-African unity and freedom from colonialism and imperialism, as well as a demonstration of his conviction in the right to self-determination. 4. Kenneth Kaunda. Pan-Africanism is a political ideology that places an emphasis on the unification and cooperation of all African states. Kenneth Kaunda, the first president of Zambia, was a strong proponent of this ideology, was an influential figure in African politics, and was instrumental in the decolonization of the African continent. His contributions to African politics were important. Kaunda was a staunch supporter of a number of different liberation movements, in addition to being the host of the All Africa People's Conference in the year 1958. He gave assistance to nations that were fighting against colonialism and apartheid and extended asylum to political refugees who were on the run. For example, when the war for Mozambican independence was going on, Kaunda let Mozambican refugees remain in Zambia and gave them the necessary assistance. His unwavering commitment to the cause of Pan-Africanism garnered him the affection and esteem of people all throughout the African continent. Oh, you made it this far. That's awesome. We have a lot of similar positive Africa videos on our channel. Our focus is on sending the message of development and uniqueness of Africa, so be sure to hit the subscribe button to support us. 3. Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara, the former president of Burkina Faso, came to power in a coup in 1983 and led the country's revolutionary movement. Due to his staunch opposition to imperialism and corruption and his commitment to Pan-Africanism, he is generally recognized as one of Africa's most famous and powerful leaders. Sankara believed that African solidarity and unity were crucial in the face of colonialism and imperialism. He was a strong advocate for liberation movements in other African nations and advocated for an end to Western assistance and control in Africa by changing the name of his nation from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, which means land of the upright people. Sankara encouraged the use of items made in the country. He also launched one of the most effective health initiatives in Africa and vaccinated over 2.5 million people to combat infectious illnesses. Sankara inspired many throughout Africa with his foresight and leadership, proving that the continent was capable of achieving both political and economic autonomy. He was assassinated in the military coup orchestrated by his former friend and ally, Blaise Compaoré. Sankara's death was a blow to the African continent, as he was seen as a beacon of hope for a new era of Pan-Africanism and self-determination. 2. Julius Nyerere. To say that Tanzania and Africa were liberated in large part due to the efforts of Julius Nyerere would be an understatement. From 1961 until 1985, he served as Tanzania's first president, and during that time, he became renowned as a strong supporter of Pan-Africanism, socialism, and African unification. The esteem and admiration for Nyerere as an African leader went well beyond Tanzania. The efforts Nyerere made to foster unity and collaboration among African states were clear indicators of his dedication to Pan-Africanism. Nyerere founded the African Liberation Committee in 1963 to aid liberation forces throughout Africa, including Frelimo and the MPLA, in their fight against colonialism and imperialism by providing them with military and financial support. During his time as ALC chairman, Nyerere successfully rallied other African heads of state to support the liberation efforts. His work was essential in the independence of numerous African nations, and it motivated a new generation of Pan-Africanists to keep up the battle for African freedom. In addition, Nyerere was a staunch ally of various African liberation groups, especially the South Africa's African National Congress (ANC), which he helped financially and militarily. Nyerere's work in the Pan-African movement and his promotion of African unification continue to serve as a source of inspiration for current and future African leaders and people. Nyerere passed away on October 14, 1999 in London at the age of 77. 1. Patrice Lumumba. Patrice Lumumba was the first person to be democratically elected to the position of Prime Minister of the Republic of the Congo. He was a nationalist from the Congo and a pivotal role in the anti-colonialism movement in Africa. He battled relentlessly for the independence of both his nation and Africa as a whole. It was a freedom fight. The impact of Lumumba's leadership on Africa was felt throughout the continent, and his views on Pan-Africanism were influential to a great number of people. For example, he was the founder of the All-African People's Conference, which was an organization that convened government officials from several African nations in order to debate the emancipation of the continent. In addition to this, he argued for the establishment of an African currency as well as a unified African military. However, Lumumba's time as Prime Minister was cut short when he was deposed in a military coup led by Western nations. After being imprisoned, tortured, and finally killed in January 1961, Lumumba became the martyr of African independence and a symbol of struggle against colonialism. His assassination was the culmination of a campaign that began with his imprisonment. What unites these African leaders is their dedication to serving their people and their continent. They suffered much for their commitment to the emancipation and progress of the continent. Their efforts should motivate the present generation and remind them that there is still more to be done. The work of these great men must not be in vain, and we must keep pushing forward toward a genuinely African future. We have an obligation to them and to ourselves to help bring about a unified, wealthy, and post-colonial Africa. Let us carry on their work to make Africa a better place for future generations. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed our countdown of the 6 greatest leaders Africa has ever seen. If you are interested in learning more about the influential figures who have shaped the continent's history, be sure to check out our other video on the 6 most influential leaders Africa has ever seen. In that video, we take a closer look at the leaders who have had the biggest impact on Africa's political, social, and cultural development. Just click on the video on your screen to watch it now.